The working center perspective was that the operation of St. John's Kitchen was challenging enough, but was made harder by a structure that gave the St. John's Kitchen Committee power over hiring and moral sway over direction. Alternative ideas are easily overpowered by fear. The committee listened to the kitchen manager's concern about the patrons and the hard work involved in producing the meal. The worries created a distrustful environment. St. John's Kitchen was quickly degenerating into a stodgy social service. By August 1988, the St. John's Kitchen Committee became a subcommittee of the Working Center Board, formally recognizing our day-to-day responsibility. We were eager for the partnership and the freedom to create the place we envisioned. Over the summer, we recruited Arlene McPherson as a woman of faith and justice to give St. John's Kitchen new direction. Arlene's first years were spent understanding the issues. In February of 1990, we learned that the province was cutting the emergency funding we had been receiving. Their rationale was the increases to general welfare assistance had reduced the need for the program. The region declined to help us provide the daily meal. We had already rejected their recommendations to create a list of patrons and charge a fee. Other groups with food programs were granted funds if they restricted service by limiting the number of visits per month. We stuck to our position, which made us poorer in funds, but, as it turns out, richer in participation. We knew we did not want to conform to a centralizing system that offered money in return for social control. Rather, we chose to use our resources frugally and rely directly on the people who used the service. A new spirit of hospitality started to catch on. Arlene worked slowly, repairing what was St. John's Kitchen and quietly injecting new values of honesty, compassion, and volunteerism into the structure. One man noted he would never forget how Arlene had encouraged him during his drunken grief. When a new tragedy struck, there was Arlene again, willing to sit there each day listening. He was grateful, knowing he could release his anger and despair to a friend rather than with a jug of wine on a park bench. At a rally held at St. John's Kitchen to criticize the provincial government cutback in June 1990, Brian Caldwell of the Kitchener-Waterloo Record interviewed Dwayne and Nancy Curry, who were both in their 40s and who each day walked 8 kilometers to the kitchen to get a free hot meal. Dwayne had been laid off 6 months earlier. Their unemployment insurance paid them about $1,000 a month, of which $550 went to rent. They had 2 children under 3, and they had just had their telephone disconnected. Another patron said, "This place kept me alive in winter months." During these years, Arlene worked with a street kid who over time completed her master's and now has a family. Arlene documented the barriers this young woman encountered along with her heartwarming success at school. Grants and other funding had allowed St. John's Kitchen staffing to grow to 5 positions in the first years. When Arlene arrived and one of the grants ended, we reduced staffing to 3 positions. This meant there was a cook, a cook's helper, and a floor worker. The loss of the provincial grant in 1991 coincided with the cook's retirement and another staff member taking a leave. We hired a cooking facilitator who encouraged others to cook. We had a part-time worker for the floor, and Arlene helped people see how they could contribute. The loss of the grant became the means for achieving our original goal of involving the whole community in the work of redistributing food. In the December 1994 issue of Good Work News, Arlene McPherson explained the kind of community we were attempting to create. St. John's Kitchen long ago became a place where people gathered for more than food. People come to socialize, meet friends, play cards, support one another, and help with tasks. It is a rare place where people with strongly divergent points of view can spend substantial periods of time in relative harmony. It seems like the ideal place to develop and practice the virtues of gentleness, respect, love, and inclusiveness that sometimes get forgotten in our competitive and often harsh world. St. John's Kitchen always had a spirit of hospitality, essential to its success. We learned how fragile this spirit can be and how lurking institutional responses threaten to creep into the structure. We were wise to identify the problems early, and Arlene had a calming approach that reinserted the values of cooperation and the ability to listen to people's lived experience.